Hello and welcome to episode 32 of my series as I build my way through the Battle Games in Middle-earth magazines. After our brief foray to Minas Tirith and Osgiliath and the cities of men, this month we are heading over to Lothlorien and making some elven tree houses, which is pretty cool. Going to be a good fun build, I think. I've had a look ahead, which I don't often do, and I've managed to gather together all the materials that I need, I hope, so I should be able to get this done. I'm not sure whether I'm going to do any kind of advanced build. I've done quite a lot of trees and there's a lot of stuff on my playlist and in my back catalogue if you want to see it. So I think what I'm going to do is maybe make 2 or 3 of them and make a couple of different sizes and just mix it up a bit and make a table, or try to work towards making a table towards Lothlorien. Now, there is a little bit of background to this because before I started this channel, I was going to be putting videos over to Top Table Gaming and a build that I was going to do for them, a community build I was going to do for them, was a fully playable Lothlorien board. Now, the design was epic. It would have been a 6x4, it would have had all sorts of, it had trees with trunks like this, and all sorts of stuff, and it was way out of my skill level at the time, and it probably is still out of my skill level now, and I'm not going to do that as part of this video, which is a real shame because I kind of wish I could, and I wish I could find the time and the scope to do it, but it's just not going to happen. So this video is going to be about how to do this easily, how to do this with pretty normal hobbying skills, which is what I've got. And I will hold that project in the back burner and eventually I will get to it, I promise. So it will eventually come to the channel. Anyway, that's a really long intro. Don't normally talk that much. I did just want to touch on that old project. What we're going to do now is have a look at the magazine, see what materials we need and make a start. So here we are, the Elven Tree Platform. As I said, I'm very excited about this. Within the mighty trees of Lothlorien, the Wood Elves protect their realm. From their hidden tree platforms, they defend their home with deadly archery. In this PAX modelling workshop, we show you how to create some unique elven terrain. And it's really cool because it's going to have multiple levels, which is what always excited me about doing this. When the heroes of the Fellowship reached the forest of Lothlorien, fleeing the goblin hordes of Moria, they were immediately challenged by Haldir and his Wood Elf patrol. It is only the desperate nature of their mission and the will of the Elf Queen Galadriel that allow them to enter unharmed. Graceful tree platforms, known as the Tellanes among the Wood Elves, dot the forest canopy. Used as watchposts and guard towers, they can be found not only in the woodland realm of Lothlorien, but anywhere elves might dwell. This modelling workshop takes you through the steps to make an elven tree platform, a simple but exciting addition to your battlefield. So like I say, what I think I'm going to do is make 4 or 5, maybe even 6 of these, try to really do a good sized playable terrain, and I'm probably not going to do an advanced build, but I might change my mind. We shall see. As your modelling skills have grown, you will have built up a collection of useful tools that you will use time and time again. From now on, when we list the materials for each modelling project, we will assume that you already have the following items in your basic hobby kit: hot wire cutter, scissors, clippers, pencils and pens, paintbrushes, or whatever. Okay, so yes, all the normal stuff. What they say you need is thick and thin garden wire, masking tape, styrene, foam sealing towels or thin hardboard, black texture paint, a small copper bottle, thick and thin card, plaster filler and a bunch of paints and twigs and thin string, lichen and what have you. So it's basically making trees and then making platforms and also making some walkways between the two. So I'm going to get my stuff together and we'll start making the first step, which is the wire tree trunk. And I had a lot of fun with this, which I will tell you about in the next segment. So the first step is the wire tree trunk. And we use the same techniques as we've used before to make twisted wire trees. I've made loads of them. However, this one needs to be bigger. And for the materials, it suggests that you use thick garden wire. Now, that's not something that they sell over here. And so I was umming and ahhing. I was really struggling to work out what to get that would be long enough, because it needs to be 20 centimetres long. And the longest wire I've got for making these trees is not 20 centimetres. It's... This is the longest thick wire I've got, and it's just not going to be big enough to make big trees. So I was umming and ahhing, and then suddenly the workman we're making use of some wire there. We're renovating where we live, and they're building a wall, and they needed to wire together 2 bits of wood so they could pour cement in the middle. And they had some chicken wire, some old like wire mesh fence that they were taking apart and making use of. And I looked at it and I realised that that's nice and thick. It's going to be making a lot of noise because it's curved, but yeah, it's nice and thick. It's going to be quite tough to pull around, but if I'm looking at making some quite big trees, then this is going to be perfect. So yeah, so I basically took the clip snips and unsnipped a load of the wire that was in this fence, and now I've got some wire. So this is going to be for my very, very big tree. I will make some more trees, like I've said, and I will make use of my more traditional thick wire that I bought, and that will make smaller trees. But if I want to do a really big tree, then I need to have this. So what they say to do is to take 7 or 8 to 12 longer pieces of thick garden wire, and twist them together, and then twist 6 or 7 lengths of wire together to form the trunk. So let me start that again. For the tall trees of Lothlorien, we use about 8 to 12 longer pieces of thick garden wire, each one about 20 centimetres, which I'm going to do longer, giving us larger, more majestic trees. Twist 6 or 7 lengths of wire together to form the trunk. Leave plenty of space at the top and bottom of your twisted wires so you can form roots and branches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come along here. I've got my measure, and this might clatter and make some noise. It's a bit annoying. It's in a curve, but I'm going to cut to 30 centimetres or maybe even 40, because I want this to be a really, really big tree, and I'm going to cut as much as I can, and I may need more wire, and I may need better snips because these are my hobby snips, not my, yeah, I'm going to need better snips. So I'll get some better snips, and I'm going to cut as many of these as I can at 40 centimetres long. When I've done that, I'll bring you along, and we'll show you how I'm going to twist them together, and we'll do the next step. But yeah, if you're able to get proper garden wire from the garden centre, that's going to be much easier for you than this. So I've got about 8 pieces here of the thick wire, and I'm going to start to twist them together. So the way I'm going to do that is going to be a bit tough. It's not as easy as it is with the thinner wire. So I've got these are actually the snips I also use for doing the cutting, and I'm grabbing hold of the bottom and twisting. So I need to hold on to it with the snips because it's really, really strong, and that way I'm getting myself a twist. Now I'm going to need to do a second, introduce more than one, and I'm not sure how I'm going to do that. One thought I've got, let's see if it works. You're learning with me learning, as often happens, is to do a twist some of the way and then start to introduce them again. So let's see whether this works. No. Right, I'm going to have a think about that, see how I'm going to do it, and I will come back and film again when I've worked it out, because it's not wanting to let me grab it all as a 3. Oh, I've got it. Bit more patience needed. So yeah, we can twist this one in. And now we've got 3 together, and then what I'll do is I'll introduce all the others, and then when I've got all of them in like this, I will start to bind them all together so there'll be a nice thick tall trunk, and then when that's done I'll bring you back and we'll start to add some more branches to the sides, and that's the next step. So yeah, I've got all of these to combine. I'll do the same technique as that, just bind them in and bring them all up, and then once they're all to this stage, wire them all together, and let's have a see how well that works. This is what I've ended up having twisted all of the wire that I cut. What I got left here is the shorter bits. They were not quite as long as the others. And I'm going to start to build some root systems, I think, with these, which kind of ties into the next step in the instructions in the magazine. So once you have a good solid trunk, separate the ends at the top and bottom of the trunk into 2s and 3s, and twist them together to form thick branches and roots. You can use your remaining lengths to add more branches and roots. Simply pick a point on the trunk where you want to place your branch and wrap it around the trunk a few times. Then taking a second piece of wire, repeat the process, wrapping it around the first. So I'm going to do that. I've basically gone for quite a good solid thick trunk, and what you need to remember is that trunks are generally fatter at the bottom, and that's just how they work. So what I'm going to be planning on doing is starting to do work down from the middle to do some roots coming out, and then I'll work up from the bottom and then start to pull some branches off and also go higher and higher with some branches. So it's going to take quite a long time. It took quite a time to do all of that, particularly because it's such hard wire to bend. But I also have more. So here is some more which I'm going to be able to cut up into lengths and make use of. So I've got plenty of that gauge wire to finish this tree. So yeah, once I've got all of that gauge wire on and I've finished doing this structure, I'll definitely come back. I might come back in the middle to show you some of the branches and some of the kind of starting from the middle, whatever. I'm going to get this done off camera now because it's going to be a bit fiddly and I'll find it hard to stay in shot. But I'll try to do a little bit more footage of how I'm winding it. But what I will definitely do is come back when I've finished using this gauge wire, and I'm going to look. I might make the same mistake that Terranscapes did. I missed that channel, and add in some different gauges of wire, but I'm not sure whether I will. It does say to in the magazine. It says you can add smaller bits and glue them on and all that stuff. I'm not sure if I'm going to. I've got plenty of this to do. Going to do some winding. Let's get going. I have actually also, just while I'm shooting this, I have started some of my alternates, which is with different gauge. So this is with the normal wire that I use for making my twisted wire trees. You can see I've made a good start on that, and that's more traditional. So I've gone for more of the branches coming off. I've tried to make it quite a tall trunk with no branches, because I think what they would have trimmed the branches off of there so the orc couldn't climb up. So that's why that's quite a tall kind of gap there. But yeah, so I'm going to make several of these, and I'm going to make at least one of these with this gauge. So I'll bring it back when I finish twisting and we'll get on with the next step. I hope that you're enjoying this. I'm enjoying it. I don't often enjoy trees, but I'm really enjoying how this big one's turning out, because it's totally new and it's an interesting challenge. I've run out of the wire. I've wound all of that wire on, and I'm cut to pieces. I've got a blood blister. I've got one of Rosie's plasters on because we've run out of plasters. Twisting, blood everywhere. Twisting wire like this is a bloody process, but I'm really pleased with how it's looking. I think I do need to get some more. I will go and get some more tomorrow. Now it's very late. I'm not going to go and dig around in the hardware room now to get more wire, but I'm going to get a little bit more. But it really has come on well. I'm very, very pleased. What I'm probably going to do now is make some more smaller ones like this, and just get a pretty extensive forest going for this build. So I'm just going to spend the next couple of days twisting wire trees and not do anything else. And when I'm done with that, I'll come back. It'll be seconds for you, it'll be days for me, and we'll have a look at all the trees and we'll see what the next step is. So this is what a bathtub full of twisted wire trees looks like. I'm not quite finished. You can see here, if I can pull one out without it getting tangled, there's lots and lots and lots of overhanging and over long sections basically on these trees, which I'm going to need to snip off. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to snip each of these sections off, but I'm actually going to wind them back onto the tree, both as little stubby branches, because my story is that they trimmed off the low hanging branches to make it harder to climb the trees. So I might put a couple of stubby little branches down the bottom, and I'll also put a couple more branches and maybe just thicken it up. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to snip all of these extra bits off so that the branches are to the right length, and then make use of the offcuts to bulk up the tree. The big tree, which is right here at the bottom and which I am so pleased with, I've actually managed to get some more thick wire, so I'm going to bulk that out as well. So I'm still building. The one thing I've done since, and I wanted to say about, was the roots. I actually ended up using my pliers, the workman's pliers, to twist these, and that made it a lot easier, because this is very hard on your hands. And so using the blue pliers, which I have just here, because I'm about to do this again, so using these pliers to do the twisting made it a lot easier, just like grab and turn. So yeah, onwards. It's a long, well, I'm just doing loads of trees. So if you only do one tree, it's quick. But I've worked out what my advanced build part of this is going to be, and I'm very excited, which is why I've done so many. So I will be revealing that soon. Finish off the winding, and then we'll come to the next step after that, which is going to be putting on masking tape. Well, here we are, lots and lots of wire wound trees, and I'm really pleased with them actually. They've come out probably some of the best I've ever made. I've put some extra little stubby things on, like I say. Specifically here, this one was done as a stubby one with added on. I might do a few more, but I'm going to start the next step now so that I can start getting a bit of a production line going, because it's a bit tedious just doing the same thing over and over again. I like to mix it up. So this is going to be about covering the wire. So once you've got the basic shape of the tree, you're ready to wrap the wire in masking tape. So I picked up some masking tape. They use white masking tape. We don't have that here, so I've got the yellow stuff. And what you say is if you cut the masking tape into thinner strips, you'll find it easier to wrap, as well as giving a more even finish. Don't worry if you don't cover all the wire, just try to conceal most of the gaps. You don't need to cover the ends of the wire, as these will either be pushed into the base or to form roots, or covered later when you add foliage. So what I'm going to be doing is coming along and wrapping masking tape around the tree. Now, I am going to do the masking tape, but I've never really been happy with it. So I'm hoping that this time it actually works. I've done a few different techniques, and I might try to do a couple more techniques for the video to show a couple of different ways that you can potentially do this. I've had a pretty good result using sealant, the paintable bathroom sealant that you can buy. That gives that's a good filler, and it stays flexible, which means that you can then still kind of alter the shape, because trees aren't straight up, they're curved. So I could look at bending this there and bending that there, and that's a much more realistic trunk shape. And the good thing with using the silicone sealant is you can continually do that even after it's all finished. It remains possible to change the shape. So I might try and do some of that as part of this project, I'm not sure. But at first, enough rambling. What I'm going to do is put masking tape over the trunks of these trees. So I'll get that done, and when I come to the next step, I'll be back to show you. The big tree I'm still winding, so that's not ready yet, but when I come to that, I might do that one differently, actually, to be honest. That might be one I do differently. So I might do all of these with the masking tape and then do the big one differently. So yeah, I will be back with that shortly. The next step is to do basing for the trees, and this is where I'm going to diverge slightly and do a little bit more of a different build. So at the end of last month, I talked about a warp prevention, and you're about to see a little bit of a sneaky peeky, because I'm going to make use of the idea I've got. So I'm making these little frames, which are very easy and quick to make, as you can see, and I'm able to put this tile on top, which I can glue down, and that's what I'm about to do now on this. Now, this is the water level tile, obviously, and when I put terrain on top, so a bank or whatever, I use this blue foam. So I'm going to sandwich the two together so that it can line up. So I haven't cut the blue foam yet, as you can see, but what I'll be doing is I'll be gluing the white foam down to the base and then the blue foam down on top. And then what I'm going to do, this is going to be a three-way sandwich, I'm going to get the black foam, which I use quite often, and I'm going to put that on top of this. However, what I will be doing is I will be cutting out circles of black foam as a base for my trees, and circles of black foam from within the what I'll stick on top of this, and then you've guessed it, I'll be able to put the tree in or take it out, so I'll be able to use the trees as scatter terrain if I want to, which is important to me, but I'll also have a really solid base where I can actually build Lothlorien. And I'm going to be able to make lots of these tiles, which is why I've done so many trees, and put maybe 3 or 4 trees per tile. I've done a lot of trees, so I've done enough for 3 tiles basically, 2 tiles with normal sized trees, and then one that will have a bigger hole in it, or maybe even permanently have the big tree on it. So that's the plan. So the way that I'll be doing this, as I say, is sticking the white down, and that's going to be done with PVA and clamps. So I'll quickly do that now. I will then cut and glue the blue foam on top of the white foam using my strong glue, the super strong glue that I've started to like using. And then I will then I'll probably do that off camera because that's just the same. And then what we'll do next is we'll start to prepare the black foam, which is going to go on top, and also have holes cut out of it. Now, just to say, obviously what I'm going to need to do is cut not just enough holes to put trees on, but I'm also going to have to cut holes to act as blanks. So if I decide to do this as just a flat area without any trees, then the tile will also work. And I will make myself a template, so in the future I can potentially make different things to put in these blanks. So yeah, while I'm talking, that's been glued, and now you'll find out why I have so many clamps. Let's get this clamped. Here we are with the wrapped tree. You can see that I have got some issues here with it unwrapping, which is what I've always found with masking tape, but it'll be alright once it's gone through all of its processes. I think it'll be okay. But if you are a little bit worried about that, you can put some super glue in, or you can cover it in and put a little bit of PVA on, and that will reseal it. So what I'm going to do now is start to look at this template for the base, and I'm going to make it out of this cardboard, which is nice and thick, so that means the template will last a long time. I've got to use it a few times. It's not going to be a single use. What I'm going to do, I'm going to make it, I'm going to do it evenly, but I want to work out rough dimensions, and then what I'll do is I will cut it out so that it is roughly circular. So I don't want it to be too small, but I don't want it to be too big. That's probably going to be too big. So I'm going to just sit here and sketch for a bit, work out roughly the size I want it. That's looking better already. And then once I've got that right, I do have I'll draw around a circle of roughly the same size, and then cut that out. And then what I'll have is a nice template. So if we have a look at this here, that or that is probably going to be perfect, isn't it? This, so I can draw around this to get it circular. Right, I'm going to draw around that. I'll get another pencil, I'll find one from somewhere, cut that out, and then what I'll do is I will make a load of bases out of the black foam, which I'll bring along and show you. So I'll get my template done, and then I'll be back. So I've not yet shown you how I've cut these out, because I've just made a screeching change of mind, and so I'm going to do them differently. So I'm glad that I practiced and had a think. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put 3 trees on each of these tiles, and here you can see the tile that's got the blue foam on it. And originally I was going to put another sheet of the black 5mm XPS and cut holes in it and have it so that it had so that it was entirely covering, so it was another sandwich, and then have the holes in it. But I've changed my mind, and the reason why I've changed my mind is I'm doing more of these tiles, and these tiles are going to be this high where they've got the land area. So this is the water level and this is the land level. If I put another black layer on top, these are going to sit slightly more proud than the other tiles I'm doing, and that's not going to be very right. And I don't really want to have to make a tile that transitions into Lothlorien. Though I could do with a tree on one end and have it slope up towards trees and have trees on a slightly higher ground, but But no, I'd rather go up in increments of the blue foam anyway if I'm going to be doing any kind of elevations. So instead, what I'm going to do is, this is the base for the trees, and it's a good size, though again, with this thought, I may make it slightly smaller, but I might not. So this is where the tree will sit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out a ring around it slightly larger. So I'm going to cut out a black bit of foam that's slightly larger, cut the ring out from the centre, and just glue that sloped foam down so that there will be little rises, and in those rises will be where the trees are. So the rest of the terrain will stay at this height, but the trees will be slightly raised up in very, very shallow lumps. So that's what I'm going to do, rather than do the whole thing in black. So I'm going to have another couple of plays getting the technique right, because this has been a little bit of a pain. I've got my template. The template is not circular. I am, even as I say, wondering whether I might change my template and make it so that it's actually using a protractor and cutting in a dead circle. Might make it a bit easier for me. These will only be able to sit in one direction at the moment, because if you put it like that, they won't fit, obviously. Couple of thoughts, lots of thoughts, playing around with this, but really having fun. I've nearly made all of my tiles as well now, so I'm making 3. I will have a spare tree, I think, left over maybe, but I'm going to put 3 per tile of 2, and then have a tile with a large tree or maybe a small tree. Anyway, lots of talking, lots of thinking, lots of planning. This is what happens when I'm working. Sometimes I make change my mind and realise I've made a mistake. So yeah, I will next clip will show you how I'm making the bases for the trees and how I'm going to be putting the surround for the bases onto this tile, and we'll crack on from there. So yeah, let's get to it. And I have my solution, and it is making use of the circle cutter from Shifting Lands, which I have used before on a previous video, but I don't use very much, and I need to get more use out of, and this is just the right tool for it. So here you can see a circle. I trimmed this actually out of one of those kind of unevenly cut ones that I did before, so you can see probably what my idea is. That works perfectly. So what we're going to do is, first of all, I'm going to need to have twice as many circles as I am bases, because I want to have a circle which is going to be for the tree base and a circle which is going to be the blank. So that's also important. So having more circles is good. I've got 3 circles now, which means that with 3 more I will have enough to do both the base and the tree base. So the blank and the tree base. So what we're going to do is I'm going to use this to make sure that my surround is big enough, and I'm going to roughly mark out where I want the surround to be, like that, and I'll be shaping that after I've cut it out. So that's going to be enough for me to put into the circle cutter and then take out a blank in the centre. So I will do a couple of these. Again, like I say, I don't need to be too accurate because I'll be trimming these down. I just need to make sure that there's enough space on these for each circle, really. There we are. So I'll cut those out and then bring you back and show you how I'm going to use a circle cutter. So here we have the circle cutter tool, and I do this carefully. So the first thing you do is you turn on the cutter, and then carefully, because you are going to cut a hole in the side, unless of course you drill a hole and then drop the wire through. I'm going to cut in until I'm happy, and then push down onto the nail, and then very carefully cut the circle out. And when I get back to the centre, what I do is I turn the cutter off. Okay, so what we've now got is the surround there. So that can be glued on to the base, and I'll slope the edges and trim it a little bit and make it a little bit more natural. But in the middle, we have our base. So I'm going to do that 3 more times for this, and then 6 more times for the other trees, because I've got 6 trees, actually 7 more times, because I've got 7 little trees, and I'll do a bigger circle for the big tree. Now the big tree, these are being cut at 12 centimetres, 120 mil across, so 60 mil from centre to edge. I'll do the bigger tree slightly bigger, but exactly the same technique. So the step now is, once I've done this, is to wire brush these on both sides. It's very important that you do that, and then I will show you how I'm going to go about gluing them down, and then we'll get to scenicking the base of the tree. So here we are, we have the surrounds, and I have done the marking up of both sides with a wire brush, which took longer than I would have thought it would. Ended up being actually a bit of a pain. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bevel the edges of each of these. So just taking a knife, actually let me move that out of the way, I was just checking to see that they'd fit, and they do right, as you can see. So that's my base. So what we'll do is we'll just come along and just bevel off the edge like so. So there is a bit more of a gentle transition up to this area around the tree. I did the brushing, the wire brushing before this stage deliberately, because I didn't want to break the circle, and it is going to become quite flimsy once this cut has been done. So that's why I'm doing it in this direction. But just be very careful, cutting towards my fingers, but not pushing, just sawing, as you can see. So hopefully I won't cut myself again like I have loads recently. All these cuts are from these wire trees. They're mostly healed actually, but my hand looked like I've been having a fight with a barbed wire fence all last week. Rosie was very, very concerned. So there we are, we've got ourselves our little section. I will do that for the other 5 now, and then I'll bring you along and we'll glue them down and get started on the bases. I've also done all the bases for the trees, so we'll work on these together. These I've only wire brushed on one side because that's going to make it a little bit easier. They fit in really nicely, as you can see there. So yeah, pretty pleased with that. I'll get those beveled. I might actually bevel the inside very slightly as well. I'm not sure, I'll think about that, just to make it easier to put in and pull out. But yeah, anyway, let's get these beveled and then get them stuck down. There we are, we have 3 areas into which trees can be planted, if needed. So what I'm going to do is glue them down using PVA glue again, and I will weight that down and leave that to dry. And it will take a little while to dry, because PVA glue does, especially because I'm putting it in a cold area. I probably should bring it in here, because the other one is taking a long time to dry. So yeah, just brush them around, make a nice smooth thin sheen of the PVA. There will be other basing materials put onto this which will help to hold the ring in place, but it's also a good idea to make sure that you at least adhere the edges quite well, the inner edge, because I'm not going to put anything else inside the inner, obviously. So yeah, work out roughly where we want to put it. That looks good, doesn't it? And that'll do. And then I'll just weight that down very gently so it doesn't get knocked with a couple of those. So I'll glue these on and glue the other ones on, and then we're going to start to look at fitting the trees to their bases. So now we come to mounting the trees on the base, and this is a slightly multi-step process for me. So what you'll have noticed with these trees is that I've left a wire sticking out of the bottom, and that will go through the nice useful hole that we poked in for the hot wire cutter. What I'll then do is come along with a pen and mark out how far that protrudes through, just like that, and then using some snips I'm going to trim that off a little bit above the mark, because obviously I haven't been able to get right tight and I don't want this coming through the bottom at all. So there we are. So now we have a shorter thing on the bottom of the tree, and that will now just position in nicely, just catch very nicely as I press it down, so it doesn't move around, as you can see, laterally, but it isn't coming through the bottom at all. So I'm going to need to do that for all of the trees. I've done 2, one test one and one that one. I actually need to snip a little bit more off this one, because I didn't, if you noticed, there's a little bit of pen marks still on the bottom of that one, and so that's still poking through, so I need to just trim off just next to that. There we are. Right, so I've been thinking about what to use to glue down. The book says to use PVA, stick the tree onto the base, and if you're using foam, poke the branches or poke the roots into the base, which is a really good idea. But I'm going to make use of the Moment PowerFix Extreme, which is something I have really grown to be a very regular part of my hobbying arsenal. So it is a silicone type glue that dries quickly, and the only problem with it is it isn't massively paintable. So for that reason I'm going to do a couple of different steps very close together. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put a circle of the glue here. This is a brand new tube. There it is. And it sticks very well to the roughened side of this black foam, and it will also act as a bit of a gap filler, which is also useful for me. And you can see that I know roughly where my legs are going to go, or my roots, because I've got little holes in the base where I pressed it in. So we've done that. And if you're only doing one, don't forget to put the lid back on. But I'm going to be doing loads. So what we'll then do is smudge this about a bit actually. And this is the step that I don't really like because it sticks to my fingers. And this stuff is horrible when it's stuck to your fingers. There we are. Smudge that around a bit so we've got ourselves a little slightly raised mound. And then what we can do is we can press the tree in like that. And if you want, I suppose you could even put a little bit more in now. Might help a bit to run that along there. So let's put a little kind of squeeze in each gap, and then I'll smudge it into place with my fingers. So it's important to not cover up the roots because we want those for a little bit of texture. But roots do go into the ground, as the book says, so covering the ends is fine. There we are. So that'll do for that. And what I'm then going to do is I'm going to come along with some gravel. So I'll just reach that. So here we have my gravel. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to scatter some gravel on now. Because any that sticks, well, oh dear, and the tree fell out. That was silly. I forgot that I need to hold the tree. Don't forget, you need to hold the tree. So I might have to redo this one. But it might be okay. But any gravel that goes on there is going to make it easier for me to paint this. Actually, that's gone in fine. It's going to make it easier for me to paint this because, as I say, this glue is not very paintable. Now, if you're doing a different technique and using a different material, you may not have to worry so much. But I'm going to let that dry, and I'm going to do the other 6 trees, and hopefully that's going to be solid. And I won't turn it upside down without holding the branch. All I needed to do was that, to empty off the loose. And then when that's dry, we'll come along and I will show you about texturing the trunk and finishing off these trees. The next thing the instructions say to do is to make smaller branches. Now, I've done these trees slightly differently to the instructions, which means I don't need to do it quite as much, but I am going to take one of these trees and I'm going to add a few smaller branches just to try out the technique because I think it's interesting, and I'm also going to try a couple of different ways of attaching them. So what it says is to take some of your wire, so you can see here I've got some that I've just twisted up, take shorter lengths of wire and twist them into branches, and then it says to glue them on with super glue, which I think it's a bad idea personally because super glue is fragile and will break eventually, though of course we will be putting some filler over the top of that, so that may make it okay. But my first attempt is going to have, first of all, going to wrap the masking tape around the branch so that it is filled in like I have done with the tree, as you can see. And I've left a tail here, and I'm actually going to look at twisting this on around the trunk a bit and then masking tape around that, so this will actually be mechanically attached. I'm going to do a second twist. And they say to take lengths about 8 centimetres or 3 inches. It's quite short. That one again I've done quite long because of how I wanted it to look. But I've just got a pot here with the offcuts from when I was making the trees, so I didn't throw them away. It says take 2 or 3 together and make up some more of these twisted branches. So the way that I do this, again, just to show you how I'm going to do the shorter ones, is I have some pliers here, which makes it a lot easier, and I just take one branch or one length of wire and I twist it around like that, which is a quick way of getting this done. And with this thin wire, it doesn't hurt actually, because you're not spiking yourself like you are with a big tree, which I'll show you in a bit actually, because it's amazing, the bigger trees really come out well. So that's made me a little bit of a branch, and what I can do is I can pick the next one I want to wind and continue winding, and I can flatten that out with my tweezers, flatten the end out with my tweezers, or my pliers even. Tweezers, they're not tweezers, are they? They're pliers. Yeah, so that will then twist around and make the continuation of the. So this is hard to stay in shot here, and that's made myself a little bit of a tree, a little bit of a branch, a little bit more of a twist there, and we're done. Pliers are your friend in this situation, because wire is painful to stick in your fingers, and I've done it a lot. In this process, my hands are covered in cuts. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to take this one that I'm doing now, and I'm going to attempt to super glue that on, which means I'm going to continue the branch, or maybe trim it down a little bit. I might do quite a bit of a shorter one, so I might trim these ends off. And then this other one that I made before, I'm going to attach by winding around. So I'll get that done, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's glued on and when they're attached, and we can see which method we prefer. Right, so I've added the extra branches to these two. This one here is the one which I glued. I've wrapped it with some extra masking tape because it was a little bit wibbly, but it's worked okay actually, better than I expected, so that's cool. And this one here, I added the branch here, which you can see, which is done with the twist, and that has also gone on very, very well. So I have added a couple of branches. I'm not going to do any more because I just don't want to, but I did want to try out that technique. Finally, let me show you the big tree. It's pretty huge. And I'm pretty happy with it. There we are. So that's the big tree. So we've got lots of trees. We've got enough for 3 tiles as it goes. So we'll move on to the next step, and then we're getting close to being done actually. We're not far off, which is good. So making the platform is the next step. So it says to create the base for your tree platform, cut out a circle of thick card. The circle needs to be about an 8 centimetres or 3 inches in diameter so that it can accommodate your figures. So it suggests to use a small cup or bottle as a template. That's good. Then on a thin piece of cardboard, draw a second circle the same size as the first and cut it out. This will form the planking on top of the platform. And it suggests that to create the planking, cut the second circle into thin strips. It's a good idea to draw lines where you're going to cut to act as guidelines for the planking. Once you have your planks, you're ready to glue them down onto the platform base using PVA. Cover the platform with the card planks, leaving small gaps between each one. Once the platform is completely covered, trim off any overhang from the planking with a pair of scissors or a craft knife. And next, cut a long, thin strip of card to wrap around your platform, forming its rim. So that will go around on the outside. And then glue that down. Once the glue on the platform is dry, cut a hole in the centre of the platform using a hobby knife. It should be large enough to fit one of your large tree branches through. Push one of the uppermost tree branches through the hole you've created. This will anchor your platform in place. Now this is where I'm going to have to go do something slightly different. You can see that I've got quite complex structures, and I've got that on both, and I want the platform to go onto this and onto this. So what I'm actually going to be doing is following those instructions pretty closely, which you'll see in a second, but I will actually cut a line, or actually will cut down through the bottom of the second of the base as well, so that I can wrap it around, and that's what I'm going to have to do, but we'll come to that. So what I will do now is I will get some cardboard and I will get cutting, and I will bring you along to show you how I go about making the platform bases. I've just been drawing circles on card. I used the masking tape, the inside for the smaller circles. You can see I've actually done 10, just so I've got a spare, and I've done 2 larger circles, one which is the outside of the masking tape, and the other one is around this large funnel, and that's going to be for the normal sized trees, and then I'm going to do 2 platforms on the big tree. So yeah, I'm going to now cut these out using scissors, and then I'll draw around them onto thinner card to do the wood as it says. So I'll probably just use some pizza box or cereal box card for that. So I'll get these cut out, and then when I've done that, I'll bring you back and show you how I'm going about actually gluing it down and finishing off this step. This process is going to take a while. I have a feeling I'm going to be frustrated with having done so many trees, as I often am. So what I'm now going to do is I've cut out 10 circles of this size, and I've cut out one of the intermediate size, and I've got the big one over there as well. And it says to slice this, cut this up, and then glue them down onto the base. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, and it says to draw lines. Now, I'm not going to draw lines. I'm just going to kind of cut and hope I get it right. Because if I have to sit and draw lines across 12 circles, I might just go nuts. Now, one thing to point out is that I've not cut tight to the circle, so these are going to hang over the edge slightly, which is what I want, because once they're glued on, I will trim off the overhang. So this just gives me a little bit of leeway, and hopefully should make this a little bit easier to do. So probably should have kept that pile in a little bit better order, but here I am. So I will spread a thin layer of glue over this. So I will just grab a brush and some glue. There is going to be a warp issue here if I'm not careful, which is why I want this to be a very, very thin layer. And I'm not going to cover the whole of the circle just yet. And what I'll do is I will come along and yeah, I should have kept these even. Should have kept these together to make it a bit easier for myself. But I'm sure I'll be able to work it out. I'm going to come along and I'm going to glue these in place like this. I'm going to glue these in place and cover the whole thing with the stripes. So I'll get that done, put some music on. You can see just how annoying this whole process is going to be. Wow, that's going to take me some time. So that's one done. Got 9 more to do of this size. One more medium sized one and one large one. So next time what I'll be doing is I'll be a little bit more careful with regards to how I cut these up. You can see I won't actually be needing to use the whole thing because of the gaps in between, which is what I want. So yeah, I'll get all these glued up and then bring you back when I've done that. Probably tomorrow now. And yeah, onwards. So here you are. Next day, I just left these overnight. It was the easiest thing to do. And I also pressed these down between metal plates to make sure they don't warp. A couple of times I moved them as well, just so that they didn't stick to the metal plates. And that has worked out very, very well. So you can see that we have, I say don't stick to the metal plates, and then I picked one up and it wasn't actually stuck, it was just kind of pulled with it. So yeah, so we've got all of the smaller shaped ones that I wanted. You can see they're all very nicely done, looking very good as I would have hoped. And I've also got the 2 larger ones for the bigger tree, which also came out very well. So the next step, and I'll do it on the bigger tree because it's going to be a bit easier to see. The next step is to trim the edges of these here. So I'm not going to do too much here because it's going to be messy. I'm actually going to go away and do this now stood right over the bin, because you can see it's going to be dropping pieces. But yeah, so we're going to come around and we're just going to trim off all the overhangs so that we end up with the nice shape, the actual shape of the platform. So I'll get that done and then bring you back for the next step, which is fitting them to the tree, which is pretty cool. We're flying through this now. Actually, no, the next step is covering the rim. Apologies. We have to put a little bit of cardboard around the edge to make a rim. So I'll come back and I'm going to do that, and then we're going to be looking at fitting them into place, which is pretty cool. So yeah, onwards. So those have been trimmed, and now what I'm going to do, I'm going to do this in a slightly different order, and that's why I got confused at the end of the last video. Because of how I've done the trees, I actually need to fit the platforms before I put the rim on, because what I'm having to do is I'm having to cut halfway through so that I can slide the tree on. So if you look at this one, this is one I've just done a practice at, and I've managed to open it up a little bit like that and then slide it on. Now, what has happened is what I'm not very surprised about, and I think that I'm probably going to say, if you're following along, and if you've not followed along by pausing the video, if you're going to try this afterwards, I would suggest that if you're doing it like this, well, definitely I'd suggest that you cut the hole before you stick your planks on, because trying to cut through both the thick card and the plank card to make the hole has, as you can see, popped some of the this cardboard off the top. So what I'm going to need to do is glue those back in place, and I'm probably going to find that's going to happen on pretty much every single level, which is a bit annoying, but it's not the hugest problem in the world. I can glue it at the same time as I glue the platform to the tree. So what I'll do, I'll quickly show you how I'm going about doing this, and we'll see whether that happens again. It's not very easy, actually. Again, I would probably suggest that you do this, very much do this before you apply your planks. So for me, I'm cutting towards the centre, about halfway, like that. And then very carefully, what I'm doing is I'm trying to cut out a hole with my hobby knife. So you can go through, and you can see that it is already lifting that, and that will almost certainly pop off. But I can glue it back on again. It's just annoying. It does make it harder having the planks on top when you're trying to do this step. So I would, yeah, it's popping off. So I'm just going to peel that off. There's no point in me damaging it. I can glue that back on again easily enough. I think this would have been much easier without those planks in the way. So yeah, cut a hole, and then we should be able to slide it in. So I'll pop some music on while I'm struggling with this. Be very careful you don't cut your finger. There we are, we've got a rough hole in the centre. And this one is going to go above this branch but below that one, I think. Or am I going to go? So I don't want them all the same height. Yeah, I'll do it. That's all come off. Yeah, so I'll do it above there. So I'm able to tilt this to one side, push it on, like so, and then it sits on nicely. So it's going to take a little bit of time, not a huge amount of time. It is slower when I'm filming than it is in real life. And once they're all on, what I'll need to do is glue back these the bits of cardboard which have come off, and then I will also need to glue them actually in place on the tree, and then I'll put the rim on. So when I've got everything to this stage now on all of them, I'll bring you back and we'll have a look at that next step, which is going to be gluing these on and putting the rim on. So I've managed to fit all of the platforms onto the trees. I actually managed to cut out the rest without causing so much damage, and I did that by pressing the base down on the bench, which I'll show you now, and then cutting through very carefully with slightly less circular attempt. So if I zoom in on this here, I made too many of these platforms, so this is a spare platform that I can potentially put onto another tree if I make more. Not sure, but the way that I did it was, as obviously I'd cut along that gap there, and then just pushing the blade through straight like that, and you get a hole. You have to be very careful. Doing this while the camera's rolling is a bit odd because I'm at a slightly odd angle, but you can kind of do something which is a bit, it's not quite as circular, but that doesn't matter because we're going to be putting polyfiller around this. And you can see that that cuts, and you don't end up taking the rest of the planks off. So that worked quite well in the end. I worked that out as soon as the camera stopped rolling, actually, funny enough. It's not easy. I wouldn't say it's easy. And I still think I would recommend that you try and do the planks after you've done this hole. But if you have been following along, then there is a technique for you there. So we've got one there now with a nice hole in it, kind of hacked it out a bit. But that's fine because it's going to be painted or what have you. So that's how I managed to get the holes in the rest of them, and I didn't damage the other planks. So the step to do now is to actually glue these platforms in place. You can see I've got the big tree over here just on the edge, which is just epic, and I've arranged these at roughly the right heights. that I want. I don't want them all the same height. I want to have a little bit of variety. And what I'm going to be doing is coming along, and I will use super glue probably initially, and I will come in. You can see that I've put it so that it's near a branch, so I will put a blob of super glue in that gap, press that down, and that will then hold it in place, and I will finalize the hold when I come to the next stage, which is, as I say, putting on filler. So that's what I'm going to do. I won't film it. Blob of super glue, hold it, move on next. It's not hard, and all you're going to end up with is your platforms held roughly in place. Now, because I've cut, I'm also possibly going to put a little bit of super glue in the cuts where the split is, just to make that a little bit more secure. But again, we'll be painting these, and that will probably fill that gap a bit and make that a bit more secure as well. So yeah, really enjoying this. I was a bit suspicious of this step, but it's turned out really, really nicely. The next thing we're going to do is cut out some thin strips of card that I'm going to put as rims around these trees, around the edge of the trees. Now, in the instructions it says to do that before they're mounted on the trees, but because I had the split, I've had to do it afterwards, because I've had to do the cut to slide them on. I've had to do it afterwards. So what I'm doing here is I'm marking 5mm increments along the top, and I'm going to mark 5mm increments along the bottom. I hope I've got enough there. I need 9, 10, 11. So when I've done the top and the bottom, mark both, then I will use the hobby knife, a sharp knife, and the straight edge, and I'll slice each one out from top to bottom, and I'll end up with too much, but I'll be able to wrap each one around each of these platforms, glue it in place, and then that's that step done. This is a tedious step, which you kind of look at and you're like, oh, do I have to? It's that kind of step. But yes, if you want to do this build, you have to do this step, because if you don't, then you're missing quite a cool little visual cue, or that the platform is wrapped around with a border to stop people from accidentally tripping and falling off or whatever, or things rolling off the edge. So yeah, so I'm just going to get that done. Quickly marking up these steps, and then, like I say, each one I will cut down and then glue on. So once I've got them all cut, a good sharp knife makes this easy, and a very good safety ruler makes it even better. So once I've got these all cut, then I will bring you back and show you how I'm going to go about gluing them on. But I think 5mm is a good dimension for these. So there's one. You can see it's not very thick, but it should look really good wrapped around the edge of the platform. So I've got all those cut, and I'll bring it back for gluing them down when I get to it. So I've got a whole load of these now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sticking them on. This is going to be a multi-stage process, because A, it's going to be really hard to do this if I don't do multi-stage, and B, I don't have a whole lot of time, so I need to do it multi-stage anyway, because it's going to make it easier for me to manage. So what I'm going to do is, actually on this one, which fun enough has a tree branch that comes right up to the edge, which is quite convenient, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a blob of super glue here. You can see actually that plank was moving a bit, and I'm just going to glue in the one end, and I'm not even going to worry about trying to glue any more than the end. So just put that in and hold it in place, and make sure that goes off, and then leave it when that's gone off enough, and I'll glue a strip to every single tree like this, every single platform, sorry, like this. And then when that's gone off, I'll bend it round and I'll glue the other end, and then when they've both gone off, I can come along with a bit of PVA and run it around the inside, and that will make sure that the whole thing sticks. Not to my finger, hopefully. So that's the plan. It might work, it might not. It's now looking at the moment like it's struggling a bit, but that's because I'm in a bit of a hurry. So I'll get this done, I'll bring you back, show you if I learn anything or if I pick up any other tips as I'm working through, but that's my initial plan. Hopefully this is going to work. So what I'm working on now is putting the plaster on to cover up the tree limbs and tree branches. Now I've mixed this up myself. It does say to use pre-mix, but the pre-mix I've got was just too thick, so this is stuff I've mixed up. It's polyfiller, so it's literally just a hole filler, and I've added a little bit of PVA to it, which is what I do when I want something to have a little bit more flexibility. This is going to be a very short segment just to show how I've gone about it. The rough consistency I've gone for, I'm using a very old brush which is already glued together, already pretty much ready for throwing away. You can see the issue I've got a little bit with the masking tape having unstuck in places, which always happens to me, which is why I'm not a big fan of that technique. But yeah, so basically all I'm doing is going along and adding the plaster to cover up all of the masking tape, to give it texture and also to stop it from unravelling, frankly. I'm sitting watching videos, watching YouTube sat at my desk, which is why I'm filming over here. Yeah, it's a sort of thing that you can do while you're watching something. It doesn't take a lot of attention. You're just looking at covering up everything that's uncovered. And if you have a big problem like I've got right there with a bit of masking tape which has come very much unstuck, what I would do is I will put a little bit of this filler on and then come back later when it's dried and add a little bit more, and maybe even do a third coat afterwards, because yeah, you just got to take some time on this. So yeah, just put it on, and the way that I work it is I start at the top so that I can hold the trunk at the bottom to move it around, to get different angles, to be able to get the brush in right and to get the filler in all the places. And then once I've done all of this top half above the platform, then I will come along and I will do the bottom half while holding the base. Of course, the other alternative is to do the top half, leave it completely dry, and then hold in the top, do the base. But I'm too impatient for that, so I will attempt to do the whole of the tree in one pass. As I say, unless of course there's a place which needs a little bit more application because of unwinded masking tape. But it doesn't take all that long. Let's get that done. I've done a couple already. I'm going to keep going on this. It's Christmas Eve right now as I do this. The Rosie and Angela are asleep downstairs, so got a little bit of time just to get this done. So yeah, happy Christmas everyone. This video will be coming out early New Year, so hopefully you have all had a wonderful Christmas. Hopefully I will have had one. So far I have. It's been brilliant so far. But yeah, get this done, and next section will be painting. So you can see the rim gone on nicely. I didn't learn anything else apart from maybe use super glue activator to make it work and glue on really quickly. But yeah, the rims went on okay on all of them. So yeah, making some good progress here. As you can see, here is everything I've made so far, and we're about to come on to the painting step. And so the painting step is actually going to be combined with the painting up these bases of the tiles as well as painting the trees. And what it says to do is to paint with textured paint. Now, I'm going to shock you now, I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to paint everything black, undercoat everything black, but I'm only going to put the texture on to the tiles and to the base, because I don't want to texture the platforms, and I don't want to texture the trees either. I'm really happy actually, this is something to say, with how these have turned out. They're probably the best result I've ever got using the technique described in this magazine, so maybe just a bit of practice and a bit of experience does help. There's still a few problems. You can see here that's kind of looking a bit off, but trees aren't regular. They can have strange growths and strange shapes, so I don't really mind that so much. So what I'm going to do, I'll move all this off. I just wanted to show you the big pile, and we'll focus just on one tree and one base for the tree. So if you remember, these will be paired. So I'll focus on just one, and also just one of the tiles, and all the rest of it I'll do off camera because there's no point in repeating myself. But this is what I've got to paint up now, and then we're going to go into actually texturing and finishing and doing the terrain, and then we're done. So we're doing all of the kind of bits and pieces around the edge. So pretty cool, pretty happy. Grab yourself some terrain paint, some black terrain paint. Here's mine, and we're going to paint everything black. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to do the base. Now you can see that I've scraped up one side, which is the side that we're going to use, and we're going to paint black. and just going to put a thin coat of black paint over the top of this, all the way over the top of it. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to put the sand on it. Now I'm not going to do every single one this simply, and I may come back actually in a future clip and show some of the some of the different things I'm going to do. But this one is going to be very, very basic. It's just going to have sand scattered on it like that. Literally let it fall straight off. Don't want it to have a big thick covering, and that there is a little bit more textured than if we didn't have any sand on it. Covered it with, I touched it a bit too much with my finger. And then what I've got is I've got these, dropped it in, it's okay, saved it. I've got these, I'm a bit clumsy today, it's crazy. I've got these cooling racks which I've used a lot, as you can see, and they're really good for putting things on if you don't want to touch them and potentially get the paint or rub paint off. Now we're going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to paint the base first, and apply some of the sand to the base first, and then once I've done that, then I'm going to try and paint the rest of the model, because like I said, I don't want to put sand onto the branches or onto any of the rest of this model really. I only want it on the base. And like I've also said, this is going to be the simplest one that I'm doing that doesn't have any additional rocks or interest. So having said I'll only do one on camera, I may indeed add some more clips of some more advanced basing techniques just to show you how I do it. So that's covered in black paint. Let's get some sand on it, just very, very quick, like that. And that's enough, and that's done. Perfect. I told you I've been really clumsy today. I don't know what's wrong with me. It's crazy. Tired. It's been a busy couple of days. So with that done, I think probably the best thing to do now is to let that dry, because I don't really want to be touching it and holding it while I'm painting the rest of the trees. So I'm going to get to this stage with all of them now, and I'll pick out some to do something slightly more advanced in terms of basing. So maybe put some rocks on, what have you, and I'll bring you along, show you how I'm going to do that if I do. But we're going to do this as the first stage, and then what I'll do is I'll come back and I'll paint the rest of them all black, and then they'll be finished and ready for the next colours. So as promised, here are some of the ideas I've got for additional things that I can add to the bases to make them look a little bit more interesting. You can see what we've got is got some lumps of bark. I'll paint this one up to look like rock, and I'll probably get some more bark as well, but that's that. I've got an actual stone, which is really awesome colours, lots of pinks and beautiful, so I'll probably just glue that on and do my best to actually mask that off when I'm painting so I don't get any black paint on that. I may even actually do the base and then glue that on top, because I really don't want to cover that up at all, and that's going to go on my big base, which is for my big tree, and make it a little bit more interesting. And over here I've got a couple of bits of wood, interesting bark root there, and an interesting lump of wood there. These are just things I've picked up from around the garden and like the look of them and saved them. This one in particular was pretty cool. I think this is going to be quite an interesting little thing. It's actually a acorn, which is still in its outer, and I'm going to glue that up standing upright. Now, what you're going to ask me is, this is particularly delicate, and so is this. This one I'm very much unlikely to be able to make sure it never breaks, but I can do my best. What I do normally to preserve things like this is I will paint them with PVA over and over again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue these down with PVA, apart from this one. This I'm going to paint with PVA, let it dry, paint with PVA again, and then when I've made that more secure and less likely to snap and break apart, then I can actually glue that in place. So as simple as this is, you put your PVA on and just hold it down. Now obviously what I did just say was I wasn't going to glue that down. So I will use that PVA and put it on the bottom of this tree here, because I'm not going to stick that big stone down yet, am I? So I don't want to get it dirty. There we are, and that is enough. You literally just need to put your PVA on and let it dry. So it's going to add a little bit of time to my build this, but should be okay, and I think it's going to be worthwhile just having a bit more interest than just flat bases. And I will do the sand onto this one and glue this one down as well. I might press that in after I've done the sand actually, so I don't get any black paint on that. But yeah, there we are. That's how I'm going to go about doing it. So I'm going to carry on now, do the rest of these bases of the trees and also the replacement bases where if I decide I don't want to have trees on the tile, let them dry, and I'll bring you back when I come to the next step, which is going to be adding the different colour paints than black. So now we're going to look at adding texture and the initial basing on the tiles, so the scenic tiles, which is the extra that I'm doing this month. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do each one slightly differently, and I'll probably, so I've changed my mind, I'll probably end up showing each one a little bit differently. So on this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint on the black paint over the whole of it, and I won't show the whole process because most of it is going to be done just with the normal sand mix that I did on the base of the trees and on the additional basings. But in a couple of places I'm going to put slightly different textures. So for this one I'm going to put some larger stones on this build, and they're hopefully going to dry in nicely with this PVA paint mix. And then I'll finish this tile off. I'll bring you along for the next one, which is going to have some air dry clay and a little bit of like broken up road or cobbles, or maybe even the Elven, I think. And then the final one, I'm not sure. So for this one, I'm going to be putting the larger sand in, and then over the top of that, I'll put the normal sand like this. So that's what's going to happen on this one. So I'll get this done, and I'll come back and show you how I'm going to do the next one, which will have the air dry clay. So to make them a little bit more interesting. But the key here is I don't want to make these tiles too tall, which is why I'm only going for very, very basic things like this. So anyway, stones, let's get it done. Next up, I'm going to, as I say, use the air dry clay, and I'm going to put some kind of like what will look like pavement or maybe slight frescoes or whatever, and I'm going to put them down onto this base. This is the base which has the bigger tree on it, as you can see, and that's why I've picked this one. So what I've got here is, you can see over here, I've already done the air dry clay work. If you want to see how I do that, then I've done that in lots of videos, so please go and check my other videos out. And what I'm going to do is take some watered down PVA, and this is my scenic glue. There's a video link in the description below if you want to see how I make this. It's literally PVA mixed with water, with a little bit of washing up liquid or dish soap, depending on if you're American or not. And that gives a really good glue for this sort of thing. And I'm literally just going to put chunks of this down, and I don't even really care if it's got a straight edge, because I'm going to be putting other scenic and mixing this in. But if you are worried about it having a straight edge, say for example if I was, then I could come along here with my little kind of like hobby tool and just take bits and pieces off of it like that. So I'm going to put sections of this. This is the Elven roller from Green Stuff World. That's what I've decided to use, and I'm just going to put this in places randomly, and I may indeed end up rollering out some more than what I've done, because I've only done one roller. But the key thing here is you do need to apply glue, and I say this every time I use air dry clay, but air dry clay, or clay in itself, is not adhesive, so it will dry and it will just lift and it will flake off. So I've got the final bit here, and I'm not sure whether I'm going to do any more. I might look at it once it's dried. So I'll let this to dry, and then when this is dry, then I'll come along with the black paint and do the same technique as I did on the other one. So sand and black paint to give a bit of texture. But I'm going to let the air dry clay dry first before I do that. So yeah, so I think I'm going to roll out some more. just put another little bit up here, and then I'll let that dry. So that's going to be my second tile, and what I'm going to do for my final tile, I've not decided yet. Final thing to say about this that I wanted to add is the reason why I'm doing this very disjointed and I'm not doing a path is because I don't want to have to consider about lining up. When you do tiles and you do streams or rivers or whatever on tiles, you always have to have like a standard location for where the end of each of those continuous features finishes so that they can join up with the other tiles. Then right now I'm not really interested in that. So this is going to be very much more of a as you see, of a random kind of like lumps of old things that have now faded into antiquity and are no longer used. And maybe in the future I'll do roads and what have you on this tile system. But I think probably I'm going to have more likely to have just normal tiles without those features, and then put roads or rivers over the top using my modular rivers and roads that I've made. Anyway, that's a lot of words, a lot of talking, more than I meant to on this clip, but that just explains all of that. So one more lump here, and then the same again, sand and paint, and I'll bring you back for the third tile when I've decided what I'm actually going to do with it. So I've decided that I'm going to go with the thing that I've been thinking about doing for this tile, and I kind of put off, but I think I am going to do it. What I'm going to do is very, very carefully, I'm going to make a little pond. So it might have a pond and I might have a little bit of a stream, but it's not going to go anywhere for the reasons I've explained, that I don't want to have to join these through to anything. And I'm going to make use of my little burner here to very, very carefully do a dip in this blue foam. Now you need to be in a well ventilated room, which I am, and you need to not do it too much, and you need to go in and out rather than holding it over for too long, because otherwise you will just melt too much. So it makes a bit of a noise, but it's not too bad. So we'll just go ahead and I'll show you how I do this. So this is basically something that you use to do creme brulees. It's actually a chef's tool, and you can see that if you go in and out, it just melts enough, but you don't want to be doing more than that, because otherwise you'll burn right the way through, and then you'll be really annoyed, because this is actually a very thin layer I've got. I don't have much to play with at all. So we'll make a little pond dip just by going in and out like this. Even though it's well ventilated, it's stenching and stinking now. Ugh. I'm probably going to have to stop soon, but that's all you're looking at doing, like that. And this is a good way of doing it, because you don't end up with shavings and you end up with quite a nice smooth effect. There we are. Right, so that's enough. That's enough, a nice big pond. So that's already cool to touch, and what I'll be able to do with that is turn that into a nice looking pond area, as I've said. So what I'm going to do on here now is do the black paint and the sand on the rest of it. I might run this, like I say, as a little stream through here, but I'll do that now, just like that. Very quick to do, but you can see how quickly it melts. You have to be very careful to not go over the top. The black stuff is melting even quicker. There we are. So we've got a little stream here, which I'm going to be able to make look really nice. So I'll do the rest of it, I'll do with the sand now, and yeah, let that dry, and then I'll bring you back when I come to the next step. This has been a couple of hours, and I'm now ready to apply the rest of the black paint to each of the trees and each of the bases. What I'm doing basically is attempting to cover every inch now in black paint. So painting the underside of the platform first, just because you'll struggle to get to that once you've applied paint everywhere else. And then once I've painted the underside of everything that's hidden, like including the branches, then what I'll do is I'll turn it over the right way up, paint the rest of it. So it's just a solid coat of black terrain paint like this that you're looking to apply. I'm not too worried if I miss any parts, because I think I'm going to have to come round and touch up anyway, so I'm expecting to have to do that, but I'll try and get everything painted as well as I can in this pass, so my touch up is as quick as possible. So there we are, done that. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the bottom half, and then finally I'll paint the top, because when I'm painting the top I can set the tree down and I can paint it. So that's how I've worked out how I'm going to do it, to make sure I retain access and don't smudge it and get myself covered in black paint, though of course I will anyway. So I'll get all these done, and like I say, all the bases or the blanks to go in place if I decide to not put a tree up. And yeah, I'll bring you back for the next step when I get to it. Just boring, repetitive painting again. Here goes. So here we have lots and lots of trees and other bases. And the next step is to paint the model. So it says start by covering the entire model with black texture paint, which is what we've done. Once the undercoat is dry, you can start painting the tree. Apply a heavy dry brush of graveyard earth. They're talking about Games Workshop colour, so I'm not going to even go on about it. But basically what you're looking at doing is going from a brown, a darkish brown, up to a light brown. So what I've got here is my chocolate brown, which is what I use, and I'm going to come along and simply dry brush over everything. Not really a dry brush, as you can see, but an overbrush to give a bit of a kind of dirt effect. Now I'm going to do that central one there particularly as a rock, so I don't want to get brown on it really, not yet anyway. So that's what I'm going to be doing for the bases. For the trees, and I'll just quickly, let's move that giant one out of the way, it's in the way a little bit. For the trees I'm actually going to paint it a little bit more solid colour than a dry brush. So get another brush, a different brush, and let's pick this one. And what we're going to do is the same way as we did with the black paint. I'm going to start at the top so I can hold it. I'm going to make sure I cover it all. There's areas here where I've missed the black, so I could potentially come back and repaint those black, but I'm not going to, because I'm a little short of time. But you probably should make sure that your black is completely solid everywhere you need it. Though of course, trees aren't just brown, water isn't blue, all that stuff. Little bits of white aren't actually all that unnatural. So we're going to paint over the entirety of the tree with this colour, and we're going to dry brush all of the ground with this colour. And I'm also going to paint the platform with this colour. So we're just going to make everything the same, kind of like dark chocolatey brown. But we don't mind if a little bit of the black is showing, we don't mind if there's little bits of white showing, because nature isn't monochrome. But you can see it's a relatively quick process. If you've only got a few trees, it doesn't take very long, but I've got lots. So I'm going to crack on with this. I'll finish this coat and then I'll bring you back for the next step when I get to it in a very short time, in your time watching this video, a little bit longer for me. I've done pretty much all of that basic brown on everything that I need to do, including, as you can see, the tiles. What I'm now going to do is the same technique but for the rocks. So that is going to be on this tile, and I'm going to do quite a heavy brush of the darker grey, and then a lighter brush later on of the light grey. So you do the traditional, basically this is how you always do your rocks if you're going to do grey rocks, unless you're deciding that rocks aren't grey, but for me they are grey in this case. And also I've got this tile, or this is going to be a rock which is on a base that will be able to slot into one of these, as you can see, and I'm also going to do that in the same way, so paint that a bit of grey and then later on come along and lighten it up with a lighter grey dry brush. And that is already all done. That's how quick that is. Doesn't take long at all to do this. So I'll let that dry, and then I'll come along and do a lighter dry brush, and then we'll be pretty much to the stage of wanting to do grass. So flying along on the bases. It's the trees now, which are going to take the time. So they're drying. I will need to paint a slightly lighter colour and keep working on the bark. So I will get that done as well. I'll bring you along when I come to that. But yeah, you can see that's how easy and quick it is, just to quickly bring out the highlights of where these stones are and make them look a little bit different from the dirt. So I've done that chocolatey brown and everything. And what I'm now going to do is this reddy brown that I've got. I got this right when I first started this awesome journey in. I was working in Belgium. I bought this in the shop there, and I've still got it all these years later because I've still not finished using the paint pot, which is good because I like it, and I don't actually I'm not actually sure how I'm ever going to buy any replacement. But I'm just going to come along here and give a little bit of a highlight, as you can see, to the wooden parts. So the unnatural wooden parts rather than the tree. So yeah, that's just going to be painted over all of these platforms, top and bottom. Not going to go for too much colour. Don't mind having a bit of the other stuff still showing through. It's just to differentiate it really from the trunk. That's the main purpose of this step. So I'll get through and do this on all of the trees, and then we'll look at the next colour to put onto the actual bark. So the plan with this pond and river, is for it to be quite deep. So I've actually gone to some other paints which I bought in Belgium and have never really used. Look at that Belgian paints we are. So not that one, that's for something else. But I've gone for the blue turquoise and the violet blue. Those are turquoise blue and violet blue. You can see one's quite dark deep purple and a nice turquoisey blue. And I want this to look like a really deep, calm pool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my normal technique, and I may come in with some other paints as well, some other colours as well. But I want to put some dark colours in the middle, lightening up towards the edges, and make it look like a really deep, dark, calm pool. And I'm also going to put the lighter blues along the river. And I'm not totally sure yet what I'm going to use actually to put whether I'm going to pour resin, which I might do, but I need to make sure that this is completely sealed if I'm going to do that, because resin does eat through this foam quite easily. So if I'm going to use resin, I'm going to need to put a load of different layers of PVA on at the very least to make sure that it doesn't get eaten away. But yeah, I mean, that's almost done to what I want there. I just want it to look like a beautiful, calm pool like you would expect in Lothlorien, that's feeding out of this stream and going into a very deep pool that goes who knows where. So lots of dark colours in the middle. So there we are. I do like painting water now. I remember being very scared of it, but you can have such fun with wet blending. I honestly think it's probably the best thing to do to give yourself a little bit of confidence with wet blending is paint some water, because you can't get it wrong because water's random. And that looks great. So I'm going to let that dry now and move on to the next step, which is going to be adding a little bit more interest to these tree trunks. So next time I'm going to make use of this, which is yellow ochre, I think. Yep. Yellow ochre, another of the paints from Belgium as it happens, and I'm going to dry brush that onto the trunk of the tree. So you do that by putting a little bit of paint on your brush, taking most of it off, and you really want to almost get nothing showing up on the first couple of passes. It needs to take a good few brushes to actually get some colour transfer, and you can see that that's really bringing out some nice highlights, just making the trunk look a little bit more magical, maybe a little bit more like I would imagine Lothlorien. Now this is not something in the magazine. They suggest going to browns and ever lighter browns and what have you, which I don't want to do for these, so I'm not. But if you want to, you can do anything, any colour you want that's going to fit your style or how you want your trees to look. But you do want some interest, not just flat brown, because if you go and walk around and have a look outside, you'll find that trees are not flat brown. They're all sorts of colours. They're white, they're grey, they're yellow, they're green, they're blue, they're everything. So you could even dry brush in blue or orange, and it will give a really nice, bring out the texture that you've put on the trunks and give a really nice interest to the builds. So I'm going to do this on all the trees. Try not to get too much on. I might do one quite heavy just for interest to see what it looks like, but most of them I'm going to look for a result a bit like that. So yeah, one down, lots to go. So now we come to nearly the last bit of work on the trees, other than flocking on the bottom, which I'll do finally, and that is adding on the flock. Now I've just finished shooting a video which will be out soon, might even be out before this goes live, I'm not sure, of how I made this, but if I haven't yet, it's not linked on the screen now. This is a very, very simple technique I've learnt from Rubbish In, Rubbish Out. Viv did a fantastic video I watched years ago, and this is his technique, so I'm not claiming it. It's making use of the soft pads on a washing up scrubber with a foam backing, and literally just whiz it up, tear it up, make it into the right size, and then squidge it together with glue and paint and water and let it dry. And that is how I make my foam flocking that you can see here. Now the magazine says to use PVA to glue your flock onto your trees. That has never worked for me, and I'm not going to try it again on this one just because it's never worked for me, and it's really annoying, and you waste hours and hours trying to get it to stick on. You've got to wait for hours between each application, and yeah, it's just annoying. So what I'm going to be doing is using hot glue. Now this is a cool melt hot glue gun, but hot glue is also annoying in some ways because it is stringy, but it does dry on nice or goes off nice and quick, so you can put foam like that very, very quickly. Let me zoom in a little bit more on the tree I'm working on. Nice and quickly, a little bit of a blob of hot glue, and it's just ready. And what you then have to do is, once you've done a bit, you'll need to go around and adjust or remove the stringy bits, but do that after you've done a bit of application of tree. So I would really strongly recommend hot glue for this technique. I don't use hot glue all that often because of this stringiness that you can see. But once it's all dried, it's very easy to pull the stringiness off and tidy it up. So I'm now going to sit and apply the flocking that you can see here. I've got lots more of it. I made a load to all of the trees, and I'm just going to use the same colour, except I do have some red. So I am thinking I'm going to do 1 or 2 trees with a red flock, so red foam, so that will just make it look a little bit different. But yeah, we're just going to build up a really nice, quite not massively full because these are playable, so I don't want to have trouble getting my miniatures in, but a really nice coverage of greenery, and that will pretty much finish these trees apart from the basing, like I say. So yeah, just a big diversion from what it says in the book, in the magazine. But yeah, you're going to really struggle if you use PVA. It's just not strong enough, and it takes ages to dry. So for me, it's just too annoying. So let's get this done. Well, that was a long time. I think I probably spent about 6 hours gluing on this foliage with the hot glue gun, but I'm really pleased. I think they look great. I'm very, very happy with how they look. I've left a couple of bare branches. I've tried to leave a bit of interest, but I've also tried to make it quite thick and obscuring, so that it does give cover for the game. I'm also particularly pleased with how the red has come out. As you can see, I've done that on 2 of these, and they're really cool. So there we are, foliage done. So the next step that I need to do is I'm going to work on the flocking on the base, and the final steps in the magazine, other than flocking the base and doing those sorts of things, is about putting basically walkways, rope bridges between each of the trees. Now, because I've got my bases, then I'm going to get these flocked and everything, get them all set in the bases, and then do that as the absolute final step. So the next thing I'm going to do is the lake and that little stream, and I'm going to get that done now and so I can let that to set overnight. So yeah, but the trees are done, apart from the little wooden walkways and the flocking on the bottom, which I can do very quickly, but I need to get the lake done before I start on that. So yeah, really cool, but it took a long time. I've basically done every second today that I've been able to work on this, and Angela, bless her, gave me a lot of chances to get up to my desk and do some of this. Yeah, about 6 hours, I think. So lake and stream, and I've decided to do something, use a technique I've not used for quite a while actually. So hopefully it works. We shall see. I do love doing these things on camera with no practice. Basically what I'm going to be using is clear, it's my own again, clear silicone sealant. so it's transparent, and it's designed for use in bathrooms. So it's basically you can use this with an alcohol to smooth it out, which is what I probably will end up doing. I'm just going to snip a little bit of a wider. There we are, so it doesn't take quite so long to come out. So yeah, so you can use alcohol to smooth this around. It's not water soluble. Come on, there we are. So, and it's not completely clear either, which is the biggest issue with this. However, it is foam safe, which is the biggest concern I've got here. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to put loads of it out, and then I'm going to smear it around. And it might be that I need to get some alcohol out to get a really nice polish on it. But certainly at first, all I'm going to be looking at doing is getting a load of material and then coming along and smudging it. So I will pop some music on and get this all done, and you can watch. It stinks, this stuff. I should probably have gloves on as well. It's going to be a multi-stage process, and what I'm looking at doing is filling up this whole area with this material. I might end up doing it over 2 applications, do one tonight, one in the morning, so it's not too thick. This is particularly good for thin pours, not quite so good for what I'm trying to do here, but hey, it's all about learning, all about discovery. It's been a while since I've done this, so yes, I'll put some music on and you can watch and see how this goes, and if I swear you won't hear. There we are. So I dipped my finger in some 99% alcohol a couple of times there, and that's made a big difference to how smooth and see-through that is. It's got a little bit of a dip in it. It's not quite smooth yet, but I think what I'm going to do, as I say, I was going to leave that overnight, and then I'm going to come back to it tomorrow and have a look at it and see what I think. But I'm pretty happy with it, to be honest, already. Got the little bit of the rushing sensation on the stream, and then a relatively clear, calm, deep-looking pool there. I'm really quite happy, actually. So I'm going to leave that and have a look at it again in the morning. So the next thing I'm going to do on these is I'm going to paint on some of my terrain glue here, which is watered down PVA with a little bit of dish soap or washing up liquid in it. And I'm going to put down some of the traditional flock as grass. So I've got, as you can see, this base, I've got the trees to do, I've got the blanks to do, so I've got quite a lot of this to get done now, and then we'll be right onto the ending of this build. I do still need to make the little rope bridges, but I won't do those once I finish this, because I'm going to make sure that they're the right length to get between each of these sections, because I didn't think possibly would have been a good idea to make the centres of these equidistant so that every single rope bridge would work for every single tree, but what I'll probably want to do is make it so they are a little bit looser, and I can maybe swap them around a bit, but we'll get to that in the next clip. So it's a very simple technique. I'll show you how to do it just in a small section of this tile, and then I'll crack on with the rest of it. No point in showing it over and over and over, because it's the same thing, so it's just going to take a couple of hours of effort. I'm not going to cover over every single little bit of the board. I want to leave some of the dirt showing through, and I certainly want to leave some of that grey, stony kind of like bank area there around the stream. But what you do is you paint on relatively thickly, but not massively thickly, some of your watered down PVA. And I'm going to have to make some more of this up. There's a link in the description below how I make this. It's very, very simple. So once you've got yourself a little area that's enough, and I think that's enough for now for this demonstration, I normally do either 2 or 3 colours of flock. The first layer I do is going to be the dark flock. So I get that and I sprinkle that over, just without using any kind of tools or anything. Just take a pinch and sprinkle it like you're sprinkling hundreds of thousands on top of a baked cake. Okay, so with the darker colour coming on, I do at least one lighter colour, and sometimes I'll do two lighter, and I might do three. I might do two lighter colours in this, and I come across and cover over the top with the lighter colour. There we are. So then I'll pick a third lighter colour for this. Now this is some of my homemade flock, and I quite like this. I won't use this very much, but it adds a really nice highlight, and it's as I say, it's quite a lighter green, so it just brings the whole thing to light. And once I've done the three colours, which is what I'm going to do on this, I'm then going to go back to the darker colour and just add a little bit more on, because I've found that that makes it a little bit more realistic when it's dried and ties the whole thing together. And there we are. I will then let that all go off, and once that's dried I'll come back with the same glue and paint it over the top. So I'm going to do that on all three tiles, on all the trees and on all of the other bits of scatter, and when that's done I'll bring you back. And here we are, we're reaching the last steps, which is making rope bridges. So if you create more than one tree platform, and you know I created more than one tree platform, you can link them with rope bridges. Creating rope bridges is a simple process that will turn your tree platforms into arboreal village. Cut a card strip about 12 centimeters long and about as wide as a miniature's base. Then cut this into thin card planks. So I'm going to, as I've said already in the conversation on here, I'm going to measure the distance between these platforms and find an every single one, so I can have the same platforms will work on every single tree. And I'll maybe do two lengths if some are much closer, but I'm going to try and make them so they're all the same length. So I'll let you know what that is, and then I'm going to follow exactly the same instructions. So the only thing I'm going to do slightly differently is it might be a little bit of a different size. So yeah, basically you're going to be able to string a rope bridge between here and here and between here and here, and then you can basically move around. Now the only other thing I'm going to add, which I'm going to show you how I'm going to do, is I'm also going to do a rope ladder which can be either gathered up or dropped, and I'm going to make three, one for each table, because you'll have, or maybe I'll make more, but at least three, and they will be able to be attached to one of these trees and then either drop down or raised up, so that there's access up and down into the tree houses. So I can get my tape measure, do some measuring, and bring you along when I come to the next step very shortly for actually making these rope bridges. So I've got this is a cardboard box that brought some Reaper miniatures, which I saved. It's going to be perfect because it's brown on both sides, so I don't need to worry about using a like cereal packet or whatever which has some printing on one side. And I've made a 3 centimeter wide strip, which I can cut out really easily here using my sharp knife and safety ruler. There we are. And what I've also done is measured and found that about 16 centimeters is good for me, particularly on this first tile here that I was showing you before. So as you know, I need to have 2 rope bridges per tile. So I'm going to cut out 2, 4, 5. I need 5 in total because I've got one which is going to be for the tile which has the large tree on it. So I will cut out 5 lengths like that, and then trim all but one of them down to 16 centimeters because I need a slightly longer one for the tile that has the single bridge, the single large tree on it and the single small tree on it. So the next step, once you've done that, is to slice these up into little, basically they're planks. So this kind of means that what you could do is not worry about the 16 centimeters, not worry about anything as such at this stage, but just cut out a load of 3 centimeter by roughly ½ centimeter planks, and then worry about your lengths when you start getting to the next step, which is masking tape and string. That you can hear in the background our new puppy Xena. She is exploring and playing and a little bit sad, and that's what the noise is in the background that you can hear crying. So anyway, so I'm going to get these cut up, go and give Xena a bit of attention as well, and when I get to the next step I'll put the camera back on. Next step is to stick down the planks across some masking tape. Now I've put this onto this tray just so that I can move it around and it's not kind of tied down to my bench, so I do multiple projects at once. So I've stretched the length of masking tape out, marked the 16 centimetres, which is about what I want, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come along and I'm going to put the planks down. Now this isn't actually the end result of how the planks can be held together. This is a technique to hold the planks in place while we then do the next step after this. But you do want to get this about right, so I will get this done. I will make up, like I say, multiple of these, and when I've got multiple done, or I'm starting the next step, then I'll definitely turn the camera on again. But you're just basically using it as a little bit of sticky backing to hold the planks in place. You don't want them to be right close together, but you don't want to be too far apart. So I think about 2 or 3 mil between would be good. So yeah, I'm going to do that. Going to need to make 2 for, as I've already said, I need to make 4 of this length, so I'll get all of those done and then bring you back for the next step. Well, here we are. I've done 4 at 16 centimetres and 1 at 20. I can always make more. They didn't take very long at all. I actually accidentally cut almost exactly the correct number of slats. As you can see, I've only got 3 left over, which is pretty cool. So what we're going to do now is the next step, which is gluing on the string. So get some string. I've got this like Hessian or whatever it is string, and it says to use super glue, which is okay, I suppose. It's going to go off quickly. I may end up going back over this with PVA, but the way that you do this is you always put one bit of super glue. Don't try and do it all at once, basically. So let's get a length, and again you can trim this, so you don't need to try to cut it to exactly the length right now. So we'll get a little bit too much there, and I will attempt to reuse any waste or overspill, as I've said already. So what you do is stick your one end down first and make sure that cures, and once you've got one end done, then you can glue down the other end, and then once you've glued down the other end, then you can come along and you can put a dot on each of the steps, the planks, and then that will glue everything in place. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to glue a string to each of these sides at one end, wait for that to go off completely, draw it tight and glue the string at the end of the last one. When that's gone off, then I'll come along and I'll put a dot on each one and leave those to go off. So I'll get that done. It won't take me very long. So this is ideal work. I'm watching some YouTube and just doing this as I go. So yeah, this is the next step to do. So yeah, it's coming close now. This is the last thing we're going to be working on, I'm actually really impressed. This is a really nice little technique. Okay, so I've let that all go off, and it's largely worked, but it hasn't worked fully. You can see right there that one isn't glued right, and most of them are, but some of them aren't. And as I'm taking the masking tape off, it is actually pulling some of them away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the masking tape, run a bead of PVA down, and then leave that, because I'm about to head out, so try and get that done before I go out, and then leave that and come back to it a bit later, because I do want these to last. And I think, well, the super glue has held it sufficiently that nothing's actually falling right off. It certainly isn't strong enough and isn't secure enough for me to really want to game with. So I'll do that for all of these, and then once that's done, then I can trim off these tails, and then I will be ready for the next step, which is putting the hooks and the eyelets on, and then they're pretty much done. I need to decide if I'm going to paint them or not. Right now I'm actually quite liking the colour of just the cardboard, funny enough, but we shall see. So yeah, so I'll run a bead of PVA just down the inside of the back, and I'll probably actually just tie it. So I'll do a very small amount of PVA, and I'll probably just tie it up or leave it over the corner over here so it doesn't actually get glued down. That might be a better idea, and then I'll leave it over the course of the next few hours to go off. So yeah, pretty cool little technique. Gives you a really nice looking rope bridge, but yeah, you do probably need PVA, not just super glue. So next up is another little bit of a conveyor belt of work that I need to do. I'm going to be making a bunch of these little twists. So you can see just how small that is. The way I'm doing that is I've got some thin wire, and this is going to be what's used for attaching the bridge. So this is going to be at the platform end. So I've got some thin wire, and I've just got one of these little kind of like screwdrivers for a tiny screwdriver set, and I'm twisting the wire around it, starting the twist off, and then making use of some pliers to make the twisting a bit easier. So just do a couple of twists, don't have to do too many, and I actually want to leave a little bit of a split because it's going to make it easier for me to attach it in place, but you don't want the split and the loop to be the same along the same plane. So once you've got the twist like that, what we're going to do is just snip off the end with some snips and then carry on. And I'm going to need to have 4 per platform, because I want to be able to join each tree to another tree on the tile, and maybe even to another tree off the tile on the next tile. So I'm going to make quite a lot of these. I've got 6 small and 7 small, so I'm going to need to have 14, 28. I'm going to do quite a lot. So I'm just going to sit down, get those twists. The second thing that we need to do is the hooks at the end of the bridge, and I'm only going to need to make those for each of the bridges. So I'm going to need to do 2 for each end, and I have made 5, as you know. So I'm going to need to make 10, 20 of these. So there's quite a lot of repetitive stuff to do here. Perfect for sitting down and just chucking a YouTube on and keeping going. And the way you do that, twist to 90 degree, like so, and then we'll snip it, and then that's one. And when they're done, they are glued in underneath here. Okay, underneath the rope bridge, that's where they go. But you need to make sure they're glued in so that they go down 90 degrees, and you need to make sure that the hoops, when they're glued onto the platforms, are glued at the correct distance apart so that those will go in. So it's going to be a bit fiddly when I get to that. When I get to that, I'll bring you along, and then this build is completed. So this last part is absolutely ridiculously fiddly and a bit annoying, but I'm getting there. I'm just going to show you quickly how I've been going about doing this, and then I'm going to sit back down on my desk, watching more YouTube, and try not to curse while I'm doing this. So basically what I do is I put a little squirt of my super glue at the end of the bridge. I pick up one of these bits of metal with my unfortunately slightly magnetic tweezers, and you can see just how much super glue I've got all over my fingers from doing this so far, covered in super glue. And I'm making use of super glue activator in this case, just because without the super glue activator it was fundamentally impossible. And what I'm doing is I put the super glue activator actually onto the metal, and then if I can get this in shot, I'll be impressed without getting my hand in the way, because I can't look at the camera. What I'm doing is putting it in place like that. And that actually went in about as easily as I've done any of them yet. So that's always nice when the camera's rolling. So I need to put 4 on that, 2 on one end, 2 on the other. There are the other 3 there, which I'll put on later and not on camera. Then the eyelets that actually go onto the platforms. So turn the tree upside down. And again, I think this could have been done better before you actually did the tree and put it in place. It might have been a bit easier to work with, because what I'm going to do basically is put a little bit of super glue here on one end, and then take one of my twists and put that in place as carefully and as accurately as I can. It's pretty hard to do this without trying to film, so apologies if the footage isn't all that great. But just drop that in place into the super glue, and that will then go off. Once that's gone off, what I then do is offer up the hooks on my bridge, make a note of where I want the second one to go, which is actually closer than you realise, and then glue the second one on in the same place. So it's just fiddly, time consuming, slow, annoying, but I'm getting there. So it's Monday. I'm watching Troy make some Ghostbusters things with his kids, which is awesome and keeping me going while I'm doing this, because this is proven to be the most annoying and difficult process just to get right. I was working on this last night, and frankly I made lots of mistakes, and I ended up stopping, going to bed, having a very good night's sleep, which I needed. And now I'm going to show you the fruits of my thinking, because what you should always do is don't do what I do, which is go off and rush off and make lots of mistakes, but think. So what we've got here is we've got the tree, and what I've got here, and it's such a simple thing, and I should just have done it from the start, but you know, that's how it is. Got a little template. So I've marked out a width. I'm marking out that width on the bases and using that to decide where I'm going to stick my hoops. And once I've done that, then the process is very much the same. So try to do this while I'm keeping it in shot. So if I draw one mark on, that might be easier. So I put one mark there. That's where one of them is going to go. And then the other one is going to go there. There we are. So we can put a mark on. I can put 2 doubles of super glue on there and then put my hooks. And then I can make use of the same template to work out where the little the rings on this side and the hooks will be going on the end of the walkways. Now the other thing I found is the walkways are about 2 centimeters too long, but that's been okay. I've snipped one down and checked it. I will make sure absolutely right that I will get them the right length and cut them down. So I've just gone in with some scissors and snipped one of them down to make it right. But yeah, this is proving to be quite difficult. It is Monday. This video is supposed to go live tomorrow, so I better get back to it. Get back to watching Troy and his kids making proton packs for Ghostbusters, and hopefully I'll get this finished and can get the edit up and get a good video out for you tomorrow, but we shall see. This has turned out to be quite difficult, this last step. So let's get Shaky Cam together and show you the end result as I wrap this build up. You can see from where the sun is, or we wouldn't know, but where the sun is means it's late on Monday, and I'm just wrapping up now. This has been an absolutely epic build. It's going to be an epic video as well. I've learned a lot. There's a lot of mistakes I've made, as I always do. I've made quite a few mistakes, particularly with these and the bridges, and I just wanted to go through that right now and show you. So basically you can see here that this tree to this tree is using a long bridge, whereas this tree to this tree is using a short bridge, and the big tree to one of the little trees is just not going to work at all. So I should really have made better planning, probably drawn triangles, equilateral triangles, and attempted also to make an equilateral triangle from that place there to the tree on the next tile and back to the other tree on the first tile, so then the distances between every tree was basically the same. But even then, that may not have worked, or would have meant that you wouldn't have had exactly the right distances. That would have been closer, because my trees aren't the same, so they aren't always perfectly centered on the circle below, and so actually the distances between the trees, it's just turned out to be really difficult to try to get these walkways, these paths to work. And I still have some here which I'm working on, and I'm going to continue working on them because I'd like to have this to be a more interconnected board. But I'm starting to think that what I'm going to need to do is to say this tree, when I'm doing Lothlorien for example, this tree goes on this base in this place and joins to this tree which goes here, and I have perfectly matched bridges going between them, and also perfectly positioned extra points. Because the other thing that I've done is I was attempting to do 3 trees together, as I think I said, and if we look down into this tree here, you can see, if it will focus, this is where it's not going to focus on the hooks, but the hooks are just here underneath where my hand is. You might get that now. No, it's not going to. But that's where the hook is, and that's absolutely no good for the tree which sits over here. So there's a lot of learning to be done. However, having said that, with those mistakes, I'm very, very pleased with how it looks. I'm really, really proud of the results. Another little thing that I've learned, I just want to highlight a few things. These are exactly the right size to fit into the holes on the base, which isn't what you want. You want a couple of millimeters gap. So what I really should have been doing is cutting out the circle and then
shifting it very slightly smaller, so taking another millimetre or two off for the so this rim had a slightly wider hole than the actual circle for the base, and they would fit in really nicely. As it is, they're very, very snug. They can fit in without really showing much lines, but then you terrify yourself that you're going to destroy them when you take them out of the tile. Anyway, that's a lot of talking, a lot of kind of like mistakes and things I've learned, but overall very, very happy with how it looks. I really like the scattered terrain. I think that adds a lot. There's a lot of variety, and over here I've got a stack of plain grass ones. They're just so easy to make that you can have some real flexibility on your terrain. So I hope that's been really useful. I hope that that's given some ideas of how you could do something like this. I hope that the length of the video hasn't been too much. Hopefully you've really enjoyed watching it and watching this process. I've certainly really enjoyed it. Let's get some pictures and then wrap it up.
Well, there we are. What an epic build and what an epic video. And if you've made it this far, seriously, respect. Just tripped over the 2-hour mark, and yeah, it's been a really involved build, and it's been involved for me as well. It's been very, very hard work at times to keep going, to motivate myself, and very difficult to actually achieve this in the deadline. Mainly because I made so much. I went for 3 tiles rather than 2. I went for a huge tree as well, which ended up not actually being connected via the rope bridges anyway. And I think that's probably the biggest learning for me there. Was I kept saying, oh, we're nearly done, but I actually really wasn't nearly done. And the hardest part of all was getting those rope bridges in place. I was covered in super glue last night. It was a really difficult process, and it was only just pure stubbornness that meant that this actually is going to be going out on time. So there we are. It was a tough build, but wow, I mean, it looks great. I cannot wait to get it on the table. I'm probably going to make a couple more tiles over the coming months and try to do a full table for Lothlorien, which would be brilliant. Next month is another Lothlorien build, which I will be definitely building on the same tile system so that it can easily be combined. So yeah, let's get some gaming on these things, and that's obviously the ultimate purpose. So let me know in the comments what you think. Let me know if you think I made any stupid mistakes, or if you could do anything different, or if it's helpful and inspiring. Those comments really do encourage me to keep making, and I know this video is crazily long, but yeah, that's just how it turned out, and hopefully the content has helped. Let me know in the comments. I love to read them. So as always, thank you for watching, and please stay healthy, stay safe, and stay well.